Let's talk true freshman of the week. I got director of scouting and ranking Charles Power here. Now, last time this year, the guys we're about to talk about were taking visits. We didn't know what college campus they were going to pop up on. It was exciting. This year, they're scoring touchdowns in some of the biggest games of the weekend. We're going to break down who have been the best. Now, do me a favor real quick. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. We are the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, so hit subscribe. All right, we're going to start with the biggest game of the weekend, which was Oklahoma and Michigan, and Michael Fasusi. You guys remember him. He was a 5-star this time last year, and his recruitment was a heated battle. And Oklahoma won it. They pulled him out of Texas, ton of competition. Now he's starting at offensive tackle, making an instant impact. Charles, are we surprised at what Michael Fasusi's doing so far?
I don't think you're surprised, but if you're Oklahoma, you're certainly really pleased with how he looked in his first start against Michigan. It's the biggest game of the week, like you said, Josh, and he held up really well. You know, offensive tackle is a position that is very tough to come in and play well as a true freshman. So you're grading that on a steep curve, but even, I think, considering the curve, he played really well. You know, Michael Fasusi came into college as one of the stronger, more physical offensive tackles that we saw in what was a elite offensive tackle cycle in 2025, and you know, he came in just totally ready to play, and really, you know, showed well in his first start. I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you have to be ecstatic about having what looks to be a star left tackle for the next 3 years as he continues to develop under Bill Bedenbaugh. Michael Fasusi, crazy fact, he just turned 18. So this is a guy who is still like, you know, he's still scratching the surface of what he could be, but the fact he could go out in such a big game and perform so well is really encouraging. And I think if you're Oklahoma, like, they were trying to fix their offensive line going into this year, so I think that's a great early sign for them.
Yeah, and you know, this is Michael Fasusi, I think, is a good example for fans of what a 5-star should look like. The ability to come in, be a franchise type player, because if you're coming in and you're protecting the blind side of John Mateer in game 2 of your freshman year, you're going to be there for a while. You're going to be anchoring that offensive line, and that is what a 5-star prospect can do. There's other great prospects, but not everybody is a Michael Fasusi and can come in and play right away. Well, the guys we're about to talk about are wide receiver Dakorien Moore, Duncanville High School product. He was our number 1 wide receiver in the cycle of 2025. And over the weekend, the Ducks won 69-3 over Oklahoma State. Moore scored a 65-yard touchdown. He's looked excellent. Dakorien Moore, he's doing exactly what we expected him to do, Charles.
Yeah, Dakorien Moore got in the end zone really quickly in that game on Saturday. And I think if you watch that touchdown, that kind of is Dakorien Moore in a nutshell. He smokes the man coverage, has 5+ yards of separation, tracks the ball over his shoulder, makes a defender miss, and a super athletic kind of jump cut move. So that kind of shows just the lethal playmaking that we saw from Dakorien Moore in high school. And Josh, you know, we talked about a couple weeks ago when we were going through the true freshman All-American team. And I said Dakorien Moore has, of all of these receivers, has the best shot of having a Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams type of impact as a true freshman. I think we got a little glimpse of that on Saturday. And, you know, I think once Oregon gets in more and more competitive games, he's going to get more targets. I mean, he only had 2 catches. I mean, the game was essentially over in the second quarter. So I think we're going to see more and more targets and more chances for him to make big plays. But we got a glimpse of the elite playmaking ability.
Speaking of an elite playmaker, wide receiver Jalen Cooper, who signed with SMU in that double OT win over the weekend. He had 2 big catches, 89 yards and a touchdown. Now, he wasn't a sleeper. I mean, he was a top 100 guy for us. He signed with SMU, and now he's doing exactly what we expected him to do.
Yeah, Jalen Cooper is one of the more skilled pass catchers in the 2025 cycle. He was a guy who, like you said, Josh, kind of flew into the national radar a little bit from a rankings perspective. You know, he had a really good Navy All-American Bowl showing. I think the rest of the rankings caught up, and he ended up being highly rated. But a guy who we kind of expected to come into SMU and play early just with his route running acumen, his athleticism, and we got a glimpse of that in what was one of the more exciting games of the weekend between SMU and Baylor.
All right, now let's hit on your true freshman of the week. I mean, he might be true freshman of the year when it's all said and done, but edge Chaz Coleman was dominant in Penn State's 34-0 win over FIU. He goes 6'4", 246, very versatile, very athletic, and only a few games in, but Charles looks like a major hit for this Penn State recruiting staff. Inside Scoop fans, listen up. We got to talk Rhoback, and there's only one way to describe Rhoback. It's best fit, best feel. For those that aren't familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Now, Rhoback has released my favorite. It's their new licensed game day collection. Now, with novel polo designs and clean hoodie and a quarter zip design for some of your favorite schools, it is definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're super comfortable. I have them. They have an elastic waistband, great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice looking short, but also the comfortable feel for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars past and present, and they're becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across this country. Now, here's what we're going to do. Use the code JOSH on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. Now, it's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with promo code JOSH.
Yeah, he had the most dominant performance of any true freshman in week 2, and Chaz Coleman is probably not a name that a ton of recruiting fans are super familiar with because this is a guy who was unrated going into his senior year, a guy who kind of came up on the national radar as a senior. He was a quarterback, athlete type, kind of like a linebacker, rushing linebacker, who was a great basketball player, really kind of blew up his senior year, blossomed into this elite athlete off of the edge. And we really liked his upside. He finished number 137 for us. But I'm really surprised at how advanced he is coming in to Penn State. This is a guy who we kind of viewed as a developmental type of prospect, but he was totally unblockable on Saturday. Really, his film on Saturday reminded me a little bit of what we saw from Dylan Stewart early last year as a true freshman. So I think if you're a Penn State fan, I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches on the edge for them. They just had Abdul Carter drafted in the top 3. Then Dennis Sutton is playing as well as anybody in the country on the edge. And then you have Chaz Coleman, who looks like an athletic freak on the other side. This is a guy who I think could create a lot of problems in the Big Ten as the season goes on. But what he's shown early on is just really kind of eye-popping. So I think if you're a Penn State fan, you need to be ecstatic. And Chaz Coleman is kind of a good example of why we track these senior years for these prospects. He's a guy who nobody knew about going into a senior year. Looks like one of the best freshmen early on. Yeah. So he's a name to certainly follow as the season goes on.
Really cool to watch his development. Now, you guys talk to us. Who do you think has been the most impactful freshman so far? Was it somebody we named or was it somebody off this list? Either way, let us know. Comment section below.